I was born into a story where I was never the main character. That role belonged to my sister, Tessa, from the moment she entered the world with her golden curls and glittering blue eyes. My parents, Grant and Elaine, didn't even try to hide it. Tessa was the center of every conversation, the face in every family photo that drew compliments, the name on everyone's lips. I was just there. Mira, the quiet one. The responsible one. The easy child who didn't cause trouble. The overlooked one. It wasn't that they were cruel, exactly. They remembered my birthdays, gave me hugs, asked how school was going. But it always felt like I was a supporting character in a show I never auditioned for. When Tessa got a B in math, she was praised for her effort. When I got an A, it barely earned a nod. At first, I tried harder, thinking maybe if I was perfect enough, I'd be seen. Straight A's, track team captain, violin solos, all of it. But nothing broke through the Tessa glow that dazzled our parents so completely. By the time I turned 20, I stopped expecting recognition. I convinced myself peace was better than resentment. So I became the diplomat, the steady one. When Tessa stole my prom dress and spilled soda on it, I laughed it off. When she lied about crashing my car and blamed me, I swallowed the punishment. I kept telling myself, one day, this will even out. One day, we'll be adults and the playing field will level. Then I met Caleb. He was everything I didn't know I needed, grounded, kind, genuine. He listened when I spoke, actually listened. He saw me, really saw me, like I was someone worth paying attention to. He'd hold my hand in a room full of noise, and suddenly I didn't care that no one else noticed I was there. In a world where I constantly felt second place, he made me feel like I was enough. We got married 5 years ago in a modest, sunlit ceremony. Tessa, of course, wore white and posed for more photos than I did. But I didn't care, not that day. I had Caleb, and that was more than enough. Or so I thought. We built a life that looked good from the outside. We cooked together, binge-watched crime documentaries, laughed about our awkward teenage years. Caleb brought me tea when I worked late, kissed my temple every morning. We were happy, or at least I was. I had no reason to question him. No reason to believe he could be anything but the man who always made space for me when no one else did. I still visited my parents, still played the part of the agreeable daughter. I showed up to birthdays with gifts, called my mom twice a week, helped dad with tech stuff he didn't understand. I even let Tessa dominate the room, like always. I'd laugh at her stories, nod when she interrupted me. It was easier that way. I told myself it didn't matter anymore because I had my own life. I didn't need them to choose me. But deep down, I still hoped they would. I think part of me believed that if I just kept being good, kept being steady, one day they'd look at me and realize they'd misjudged. That they'd finally say, Mira, we're proud of you. But that moment never came. Instead, they looked at Tessa like she walked on water, because in their eyes, she always had. And I kept swallowing the ache. So I kept showing up, doing what was expected. Kept holding on to the illusion that adulthood meant fairness. That maybe, just maybe, I had finally carved out a place where I mattered. I didn't know the storm waiting behind the curtain of my quiet life. I didn't know that the very people I had spent my whole life trying to please would betray me in a way so intimate, so vile, it would undo everything I thought I knew. But in this moment, this calm before everything collapsed, I still believed in them. I still believed in Caleb. I still believed in peace. I was still the Mira who tried, who stayed quiet, who held everything together. I had no idea I was about to shatter. The night of the dinner, I remember thinking how perfect everything looked on the surface. The table was beautifully set, candles flickering gently, the air filled with the aroma of roast chicken and rosemary potatoes. We were at my parents' house, of course, and the occasion was Tessa's big announcement. After years of drama and emotional implosions, Tessa was finally pregnant. My mother had been practically vibrating with excitement for days. You'd think it was the second coming. I played my part. I brought a bottle of wine, smiled warmly, complimented Tessa's dress, light pink, snug over her growing belly. She looked radiant, to be fair, but the smug tilt of her mouth made something twist inside me. Still, I held it together. I always did. We all clinked glasses and offered toasts. Caleb stood beside me, arm brushing mine, his laughter easy, unbothered. I remember watching him, feeling something stir, not suspicion yet, just a vague sense that I couldn't quite place him in the moment. He seemed to, rehearsed. But I chalked it up to the performance we all had to put on around my family. No one got out of dinner with Grant and Elaine unscathed unless they smiled and nodded through the entire evening. At some point, I excused myself to the hallway to grab my phone. I'd left it charging near the guest room. As I turned the corner, I heard my parents' voices low and urgent behind the slightly cracked office door. "Elaine, I'm just saying, if Caleb's the father." "He's not," my mother cut in, harshly. "We've been over this. Tessa said it ended months ago." She swore, and yet she's pregnant, my father said, his voice tight with fear and anger. "What if Jared finds out? What if?" "He won't. We handled it. Mira doesn't know. And Caleb's too smart to say anything. The only thing that matters now is Tessa's stability." My fingers went cold. My breath stilled. I stood there, barely breathing, as the truth unraveled with clinical efficiency behind the door. Tessa, Caleb, an affair. Months ago. And my parents knew. They knew and said nothing. No, worse. They helped hide it. They protected her. Again. The door creaked as I shifted my weight, heart pounding in my ears. I backed away slowly, phone forgotten, vision swimming with betrayal. I made it back to the dining room on autopilot, my limbs moving like they no longer belonged to me. Everyone was still laughing, mid-story, Tessa animated and glowing while Jared rubbed her shoulder affectionately. I looked at Caleb, my husband. His smile faltered when he saw my face, but I blinked it away, forced a thin smile and sat back down. I didn't say a word. The minutes stretched into agony. My skin burned. My mind raced. Every glance Caleb had given Tessa. Every awkward pause. Every strange little moment I had brushed off. It was all real. It had all happened. And the people I loved most conspired to keep it from me. As dessert was served, I stood abruptly. "I have to go," I said, my voice too calm, too quiet. Elaine blinked at me. "Now?" "But we just brought out the pie." "I'm not feeling well." Caleb stood up too. "I'll come with you." "No," my voice sharpened, stopped him mid-step. "Stay. Enjoy the pie." I walked out before anyone could protest. The night air hit me like a slap, but I welcomed it. I needed something to remind me I was still in my body, still real, still me. I got in my car, hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I sat there for a full minute, staring at the house I had once called home. The lights glowed softly in the windows. Laughter floated out again. They were in there, eating dessert like everything was fine. My marriage. My family. My sense of reality. All of it had just shattered, and they were eating pie. I drove home in silence, windows down, tears tracking down my cheeks with no sobs to accompany them. I felt nothing and everything at once. Shock and heartbreak settled like stones in my gut, but above all, there was clarity. For the first time in my life, I saw my place in that family for what it really was. I had always been the one expected to endure. Not anymore. The silence was the first thing I noticed after that night. Not just the absence of sound, but the kind that wraps itself around your chest and tightens until breathing feels like an effort. It wasn't peaceful or soothing, it was suffocating. I stayed in the house for days, moving through it like a shadow, existing in the shell of someone I no longer recognized. The Mira who smiled at family dinners and believed in second chances, she was gone. I wasn't sure what had taken her place yet, only that it was colder. Still. Unreachable. Caleb noticed, of course. He wasn't oblivious, not entirely. He'd ask if I was okay, offer to cook dinner, sit beside me on the couch while I stared blankly at the TV. I'd nod. Or say, "I'm fine," in a voice that sounded almost like mine. But I didn't let him touch me. I didn't let him look too long. I didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. The words inside me weren't ready to come out, not yet. Every time he walked into the room, I wondered how he could pretend. How he could look at me like nothing had happened, like he hadn't torn through the foundation of our marriage and set it on fire. Did he regret it? Did he think I'd never find out? Or was he just waiting for me to snap? I didn't snap. I froze. I let the silence harden around me because it was the only thing I could control. If I spoke, I might scream. If I moved too quickly, I might break. So I preserved myself in stillness, hoping that if I stayed quiet long enough, the pain would dull into something I could name. But it didn't dull. It sharpened. In the dead hours of the night, when Caleb was asleep beside me, too close, too unaware, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts twisted like knives, carving into old wounds I hadn't known were still open. I thought about being 12 and watching Tessa lie to our parents about stealing my diary, and them believing her without hesitation. I thought about being 17, coming home from school to find Tessa throwing a party in our house, my house, and getting grounded for being too uptight. I thought about every moment I had been the second choice, the safe choice, the invisible one. And now this. They didn't just choose her over me again, they helped her destroy my life. My parents didn't even hesitate to protect her. Caleb didn't hesitate to touch her. And I was supposed to do what? Forgive? Pretend nothing happened? Let them pat me on the head and tell me it was all a mistake? No. That grief, that numbness, it started to mutate into something else. Not rage, not yet. But clarity. A brutal kind of awakening. I couldn't unhear what I heard. I couldn't unknow what I knew. And I couldn't go back to pretending everything was okay. One morning, 3 days after the dinner, Caleb set a mug of coffee beside me. "You've barely spoken to me, Mira," he said softly. "What's going on?" I looked at him then. Really looked. His face was familiar, comforting even, but now it felt like a mask stretched over a stranger's bones. I almost said it. Almost told him I knew. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he looked genuinely confused. Or maybe it was the realization that if I told him now, I'd give him the power to lie again. To twist the truth. To apologize before I was ready to hear it. And I wasn't ready. I didn't want his version. I wanted the truth on my own terms. "I'm tired," I said. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Not obviously. Just enough for him to hesitate. He dropped his arm. "Okay," he said. "Just let me know if you want to talk." He left for work, the front door closing behind him with a soft click that echoed in my chest. That's when I stood up. Really stood. For the first time in days, I walked with purpose. Not toward him, not toward confrontation, but inward. Toward the part of me that had gone silent for too long. The part that had accepted being less. Being ignored. I wasn't her anymore. I walked to the mirror in our bathroom and looked at myself. My eyes were hollow, my hair unbrushed, my skin pale, but underneath all that, there was a flicker. Something alive. Something waiting. Let them think I was broken. They had no idea what I was becoming. Elaine's voice chirped through the phone like nothing had happened. As if the last family dinner hadn't detonated the truth behind my ribs. I held the phone to my ear, half expecting her to sense the shift in me, the silence I'd wrapped around myself like armor. But she didn't. Of course she didn't. "Sweetheart," she said, all sugary cheer. "I was thinking, since you're so good with party planning, and with Tessa being so, well, pregnant, I thought you might help throw her baby shower. Something tasteful. Elegant. Maybe at that Willow Gardens place you love so much." I stared at the wall. For a beat, I said nothing. My body didn't move, but inside, something cracked. And then I smiled. A small, tight, purposeful smile. "Sure," I said, voice smooth. "I'd love to." She squealed. Actually squealed. "Oh, Mira, that's wonderful. I knew I could count on you. You're always so reliable." Reliable. Of course. We hung up, and I sat in the silence for a moment longer. Then I opened my laptop. I wasn't angry, not in the way they expected. Not red-hot rage, not screaming fury. What I felt now was ice-cold calculation. They thought I was folding back into place, ready to serve. But I had no intention of planning a celebration. I was preparing a reckoning. For years, I had watched Tessa charm her way through disaster after disaster, always rescued by our parents, always shielded from consequences. But this was different. She hadn't just stolen my place in the family. She'd broken my marriage. She'd dragged Caleb into the filth and let me stand in it blindfolded. And they helped her. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to show them. The first step was collecting evidence. Cold, hard, undeniable proof. I started with Caleb's old phone backups. He never changed his passwords, always assumed I wouldn't snoop because I'd never given him a reason to think I would. He was right. Until now. It didn't take long. Photos, texts, emails. One folder, dated back 7 months, full of late-night selfies, heart emojis, and flirty messages that made my stomach turn. Tessa had even used the same obnoxious nickname for him she'd used for her high school boyfriend. Boo Bear. I actually laughed. A sharp, joyless sound. I printed the images. Dozens of them. Highlighted the messages that left nothing to interpretation. Screen capped the dates. Then I searched deeper. Hotel confirmations, calendar reminders, even a voice memo Tessa left him that started with, "I miss your hands." I didn't listen to the rest. I didn't need to. Next, I checked our shared cloud storage. Sure enough, he'd synced everything. I gathered it all into a folder labeled Party Favors. I uploaded a copy to a hidden drive and emailed another to myself under a decoy name. Then I booked the banquet hall. Elaine was thrilled. She sent me Pinterest boards, guest lists, and her usual whirlwind of demands. Tessa texted a thank you with a row of heart emojis. I replied with a simple thumbs up. Caleb watched me with increasing unease those days, like he couldn't figure out what had shifted in the room. I still kissed his cheek. Still brought him coffee. Still smiled. But I slept with one eye open. The invitations went out. RSVPs came back. I ordered a 3-tier cake, pale pink with gold leaf detailing, perfection on the outside. Just like Tessa. The night before the shower, I sat in the middle of the living room surrounded by boxes. Inside each was a piece of the truth, neatly printed and stacked. I looked at them the way an artist might look at brushes before painting. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. This was about exposure. About pulling back the velvet curtain and letting everyone see the stagehand behind the scenes. For once, Tessa wouldn't be the darling. She'd be exactly what she was. And they'd see me, too, not as the overlooked one, but as the woman who finally stopped playing along. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't hope for apologies. I just planned a party no one would ever forget. The morning of the baby shower dawned bright and cloudless, a painfully beautiful day. I arrived at Willow Gardens banquet hall early, as the planner, the sister, the obedient daughter. The venue was exactly how I imagined, flawless. Golden chandeliers sparkled overhead, white roses bloomed on every table, and delicate pink accents whispered femininity and celebration. It was picturesque. A perfect mask, like the one I wore. I moved through the space with quiet efficiency, adjusting the centerpieces, double-checking the caterer's setup, ensuring the slideshow of Tessa's glowing maternity photos would play at just the right time. Everyone saw Mira the dependable, Mira the generous. No one saw what I had hidden in the folds of the pastel perfection. Tessa arrived fashionably late, draped in a pale peach gown that hugged her belly like a spotlight. The room buzzed with admiration, coos and compliments, and fake laughter. Elaine floated behind her like a proud parade balloon, accepting praise as if the pregnancy were her personal triumph. I greeted them with the warmth expected of me, even leaning in to kiss Tessa on the cheek. She beamed, oblivious. "You've outdone yourself," she said, twirling for show. "You deserve the best," I replied smoothly. She laughed, tossing her curls. "Finally you see it." I smiled tightly and excused myself to check on the cake. It was glorious. 3 tiers of pink velvet and buttercream, with tiny edible booties on top. I watched as the decorator added the final touches. Guests filtered in until the room buzzed with about 50 people, friends, cousins, in-laws, even Jared's parents, all glowing with anticipation. Caleb stood to the side, sipping punch, watching me. There was something nervous in his eyes, a flicker of unease I almost welcomed. He knew something was off. He just didn't know what. Yet, I made a speech to open the afternoon, welcoming everyone, thanking them for their love and support for Tessa and the new baby. I channeled years of practiced warmth, the kind that made everyone nod and smile. Then I passed the mic to Elaine, who gushed, teared up, and praised Tessa for being the heart of this family. Of course, there was a round of games, small talk, finger sandwiches, and photo ops. Everyone posed beneath a balloon arch shaped like a cradle. I smiled for pictures with Tessa, holding her hand, resting mine on her stomach for the perfect shot. And then, as the final course of cake was about to be served, I made my move. Before we cut the cake, I said, raising my glass, I have a little something for Tessa. A personal gift. From sister to sister. The room quieted as I walked to the center table and placed a beautifully wrapped box in front of her. Everyone leaned in. She giggled, clearly relishing the attention, and began to unwrap it with perfectly manicured fingers. Inside were neatly printed photographs, at least a dozen. Tessa and Caleb in various states of intimacy. Some taken in my house. Some in his car. Some from hotel room selfies with timestamps that told the entire story. There was a flicker of confusion on her face at first, and then it changed. The color drained from her cheeks. Her fingers froze. What? What is this? She whispered. I stepped back, lifted my hand. At my signal, the curtains behind the cake table slid open. Hanging from the wall were enlarged versions of the photos, meticulously arranged in a twisted gallery of betrayal. Gasp after gasp echoed through the room. A champagne glass shattered somewhere to my left. Jared stood slowly, staring at the photos, then at Tessa, his face blank with disbelief. No one spoke. The silence was delicious. And then, calmly, I turned to the crowd. For those of you wondering, I said, voice steady, yes, that's my husband. Or rather, was. And yes, those dates are correct. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a sustained betrayal. And our parents? They knew. They helped hide it. Because Tessa is, after all, the heart of this family. Elaine rushed forward, frantic. Mira, stop this, please. We can talk privately. No, I said, sharply. You made it public the moment you decided her comfort mattered more than my marriage. Jared's parents stood, horrified. Is this true? His mother demanded, pointing a trembling hand at Tessa. Is this really true? Tessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She just stared at me, eyes wide, lip quivering. The room erupted. Voices collided, shouting, crying, gasping. Jared stormed out without a word. His father followed. Caleb started toward me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said. And then, quietly, I walked out. I didn't need to stay for the implosion. I had already lit the match. The air behind me sizzled with the echoes of chaos as I stepped into the sunlight outside Willow Gardens. My heels clicked against the stone pathway, steady, sure, while inside, my family fractured in a way no one could tape back together. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. I could already hear the rising shrieks, Elaine's voice panicked, Jared's mother screaming something about homewreckers, chairs scraping, feet stomping, Caleb shouting my name like it still mattered. And Grant, always the silent one when it counted, I pictured him standing stunned until the first insult hit, until someone swung and he stumbled, finally caught in a storm of his own making. I didn't stay to see it. That wasn't my role anymore. I got into my car, shut the door, and let the muffled sounds die behind the glass. My fingers trembled as they gripped the wheel, not from regret, but from the adrenaline. I'd held myself together so tightly, so perfectly, for so long that the release almost made me lightheaded. I sat there for several minutes, breathing, just breathing. Then I started the car and drove away without once looking in the rearview mirror. By the time I got home, the texts had already started. One from Caleb, we need to talk. Please. Delete. Then Elaine, what did you do, Mira? How could you? Call me. Blocked. Tessa's name popped up with no message, just a missed call. I didn't answer. I didn't plan to. Let them scramble. Let them pick up the shards and try to figure out where it all went wrong. They'd never admit the truth, that it had started years ago, when they taught me I was disposable. This was the reckoning. And it had only just begun. Later that evening, while the sun set in hues of orange and lavender, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine. I hadn't eaten all day, but I wasn't hungry. I felt light and raw, like I'd finally peeled off skin that had never fit me right. I turned on my phone's ringer for the first time since the shower and listened as it buzzed itself into desperation. Missed calls. Voicemails. Caleb again. Jared's mother. Even Aria, Tessa's former best friend. I blinked. That one was unexpected. Aria and Tessa had been inseparable until about a year ago, and then suddenly, no more brunch photos, no more tagged beach trips. I hadn't asked why. At the time, I was too used to Tessa's relationships imploding, and Aria had always struck me as someone trying too hard to ride my sister's spotlight. But now, with everything laid bare, her message stood out. I opened it. Aria, hey. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did today. I know it couldn't have been easy, but it was right. I stared at the message, trying to figure out the angle. Was it pity? Schadenfreude? Or was there something more? Curiosity won. I typed back. Me? Why do you care? Her response came quickly. Aria, because you're not the only one she's done this to. My stomach sank as the words formed a pit inside me. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Mira. I said nothing, just waited. I know this is probably the worst time, and you don't owe me anything, Aria said, her voice softer than I remembered. But I thought you should know. Tessa slept with my husband, Dylan. I closed my eyes. She lied to both of us. Made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting it. I only found out after he admitted it during a fight. Said she manipulated him. I ended things, obviously. But Tessa never even apologized. She just blocked me. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, she's pregnant. Yeah, Aria sighed. I figured. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Dylan's the father. The rune tilted slightly. A second betrayal folded neatly into the first. She ruins everything she touches, I murmured. She does, Aria agreed. But not this time. You did what no one else had the guts to do. We talked for another 10 minutes, two women bound not by friendship, but by the wreckage of the same storm. When we hung up, I sat there for a while, staring at nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from pain, but from clarity. Let them burn in the fire they lit. I was already stepping out of the smoke. The blow Caleb had narrowly escaped at the baby shower found him 2 days later in the most fitting of places, Tessa's apartment. Aria called me again that morning, her voice breathless with a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. You're not going to believe what just happened, she said. Dylan confronted him. Caleb. At Tessa's place. I was curled up on my couch, coffee growing cold in my hands, the TV on mute as a morning show host smiled vacantly at the camera. He went there? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Yep. Said he needed closure or clarity or whatever. He found them both there, Caleb lounging around like he belonged, and Tessa playing house like the last week didn't happen. And Dylan punched him? I asked, sipping without tasting. Right in the jaw, Aria said, her tone flat and almost amused. Said he owed him one since your little gallery stunt ruined the first opportunity. I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. I didn't feel glee or triumph, not really. But there was a strange, hollow satisfaction in knowing that consequences were no longer hypothetical. Someone else had picked up a stone and thrown it straight into the glass house Tessa built. What did Tessa do? Started screaming. Begged Dylan to stop, then tried to get him to admit the baby's his. That made me pause. Wait, she admitted it? Not exactly. But it was all in the subtext. Dylan said she never denied the timing. And honestly, if it isn't his, it's not Caleb's either. She was with both of them at the same time. Of course she was. Thank you for telling me, I said, meaning it. Aria didn't owe me anything, but but somehow we'd found ourselves tethered by this common disaster, two survivors pulling each other from the wreckage. "I meant it when I said thank you for what you did," she said. "You cracked open the lie. And now everyone's finally seeing what we've always known." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, letting the pieces rearrange in my mind. So Tessa hadn't just broken my marriage, she'd demolished others too. She hadn't merely betrayed me, she had betrayed her best friend. And her husband. And now the man who might be the father of her child. Her reach was toxic, a slow seep of poison under every life she touched. And still, my parents sheltered her. Grant and Elaine hadn't called since the baby shower, though not for lack of trying in the hours right after. Once I'd blocked them, silence followed. I imagined Tessa was back in their house, curled up on the couch with her smug defiance masked as victimhood. Elaine would be fussing over her, blaming me for the fallout, never once questioning the daughter she raised like a porcelain doll no one was allowed to criticize. Grant would bury his head in the newspaper, pretending not to see the flames around him. It was laughable, really. Later that afternoon, a message came through from Caleb. I hadn't blocked him completely. Something told me it would be useful to keep that channel open, at least until everything was finalized. This one, though, wasn't begging or angry. It was tired. "Caleb, I don't know how to fix any of this. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just need to say I'm sorry. Not for the fallout, but for what I did to you. You didn't deserve any of it." I stared at the screen for a while before setting the phone down. No reply. There was nothing left to say. Apologies meant nothing when they were too late, especially from someone who wouldn't have spoken a word of truth if I hadn't forced it into the light. He'd made his choice, and now he could live in the debris of it. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the floor of my living room, I realized I felt still. Not healed, not whole, not yet, but still. Like the storm had passed, and for once, I wasn't standing at the edge, bracing for impact. I was watching it from a distance now, dry and steady. Let them rage. Let them spiral. The truth was no longer mine to carry alone. It was out there now, undeniable and raw. And from here on out, I wasn't part of their web. I was free of it. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, though the air conditioning did its best to mimic a meat locker, but in atmosphere. Sterile, stripped of emotion, just a place where paperwork and signatures held more weight than years of love and betrayal. Caleb sat across from me in the small mediation room, his lawyer beside him. Mine sat next to me, efficient and calm. No tears. No drama. Just numbers, property, and the final unraveling of what used to be called us. I didn't look at Caleb often. When I did, it wasn't to meet his eyes. It was to see the tension in his jaw, the wear on his face. He looked tired. Smaller, somehow. I wondered if he'd slept much since the baby shower, if the memory of those photos, of the collective gasps, kept him up at night. I hoped they did. I hoped they haunted him. The divorce was quick. I'd made sure of that. No drawn-out battles. No alimony requests. We split our assets evenly. I kept the house, mostly because he didn't fight me on it. Maybe because he knew it would never feel like his again. Maybe because Tessa's apartment had started to feel more like home to him, or maybe not, considering Dylan's unexpected reappearance and punch to the jaw. He didn't bring up Tessa once. Not her, not the baby, not the wreckage. It was as if he'd decided pretending none of it happened was the safest move, the path of least resistance. But I didn't need closure from him. I didn't even need an apology anymore. I just needed him gone. We signed the papers. Our marriage, once inked with hope and promise, ended with the same permanence, but none of the sentiment. As we left the courthouse, Caleb lingered by the door. "Mira," he said quietly, hands shoved in his coat pockets. "I don't know if this means anything anymore, but I am sorry. Not just for what I did, but for how blind I was to what you gave me. I see it now. And I know that's too late." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just nodded. "Yes, it is." And then I walked away. The relief didn't come in a flood, it came in waves. The first was the silence that followed, clean and uncomplicated. No more pretending. No more waking up next to someone who wore lies like skin. The second came days later, when I opened the door to my home and felt like I could breathe again. The third came with the envelope in the mail, official confirmation of the divorce. That one I framed. Not out of spite. Out of survival. Tessa's situation, meanwhile, unraveled more slowly. Jared, understandably humiliated, had stormed out of the baby shower and hadn't returned. But because of the pregnancy, his legal separation was delayed. He was reportedly staying with his brother across town, refusing to speak directly to Tessa except through attorneys. My sources? Well, I had a few now. People who once orbited my sister were now orbiting the truth instead, and some of them liked me more than her. The baby was due in weeks, which complicated everything. But Jared wasn't backing down. He demanded a paternity test the moment the baby was born. According to what Arya had heard, he wasn't even sure he wanted custody if the child was his, he just wanted out. And Caleb? Word had it that after Dylan's visit, he packed a bag and left Tessa's apartment. Rumors swirled. Some said he'd gone to stay in a hotel, others that he'd crashed with a coworker. But the apartment was empty except for Tessa, now very pregnant, very alone, and very publicly shamed. I hadn't spoken to her. I wouldn't. Not now. Maybe not ever. There was a time when I would have felt guilt for that, when the thought of my sister hurting would have pierced something inside me. But that part of me was buried now, deep beneath the wreckage of her choices. Tessa hadn't just betrayed me. She had calculated it, smiled through it, carried it like a crown. She didn't deserve my guilt anymore. One afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, the one Caleb and I had picked out together years ago. I ran my fingers over its worn edges and thought about all the quiet mornings we'd shared, cups of coffee, shared glances, lazy weekends. And I wondered if any of it had been real. Maybe it had been, in pieces. But it didn't matter now. What mattered was that I was no longer tied to him, or to the web of deception that had defined my family for too long. The cords had been cut. The weight had been lifted. I wasn't naive anymore, but I also wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. And this time, I would do it on my own terms. The results arrived with brutal precision, as if even science had tired of all the lies. The DNA test confirmed what many had already suspected. Dylan was the baby's biological father. Not Caleb. Not Jared. Dylan. The man Tessa had claimed was nothing more than a misunderstanding. A mistake. A friend. The moment I heard the news, I felt something inside me shift again. Not in shock, I had none left, but in finality. It was the last piece of the puzzle, the final nail in the image my family had worked so hard to preserve. The beautiful portrait of Tessa, beloved daughter, flawless sister, glowing mother-to-be, it was ash now. A scorched canvas, curling at the edges from all the heat she'd poured into it. Arya was the one who told me. She'd kept a line to Dylan, if only to finalize their own divorce proceedings. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice when she said, "It's confirmed. Dylan's the father." I expected to feel vindicated, maybe even victorious. But I didn't. I just felt quiet. Like the storm had spent itself, and now I stood in the aftermath, among debris I no longer cared to clean up. "Has Tessa said anything?" I asked. She tried calling Dylan. He didn't pick up. Filed for divorce the same day the results came in. Sent the paperwork through a lawyer, no note, no warning. She deserves it. She does, Arya said. But I think she still doesn't believe this is happening. She's been living in a dream where she always comes out on top. She thinks someone will save her. My lips curled in a half-smile. Not this time. Tessa's safety net, her glittering web of enablers, had finally snapped. Jared had vanished from her life. Dylan was gone, legally and emotionally. Caleb, according to a mutual acquaintance, was spiraling quietly in some rental on the edge of town, avoiding anyone who might recognize him. And now, with no man left to catch her, she did what she'd always done. She returned to Grant and Elaine. She moved back in a week after the paternity results, baby in tow. I heard about it through the grapevine first, then saw the proof on social media. A picture of her in the same living room we grew up in, cradling the baby with Elaine sitting proudly beside her, Grant in the background with a stiff smile. It looked like a holiday card designed to make you forget everything. But I saw through it. Everyone did now. The comments under the photo were sparse. A few hearts. A couple of "so precious" remarks from people who probably hadn't heard yet. But the silence from the people who used to flood her posts with praise said more than anything. Still, my parents clung to the illusion. It was all they had left. I didn't call them. Didn't reach out. I'd blocked Elaine's number weeks ago, and Grant had never been the one to make first contact. If they wanted to remain in the crumbling kingdom they'd built around Tessa, fine. I no longer wanted a place in it. One afternoon, I passed their house while running an errand. The curtains were drawn. The driveway was full. I thought about stopping. Just to see. Just to knock on the door and look them in the eyes and ask, was it worth it? But I didn't. I kept driving. They'd made their choice. They chose her over and over again, even when she burned everything down around them. They chose the daughter who demanded love like it was a birthright, who lied with a smile, who left ashes in her wake. And they let her come back, again and again. Let them have her. I went home, made myself tea, and sat in my sunlit kitchen, one she'd never stepped foot in. The baby's father was out of the picture. The two husbands she'd betrayed were gone. And she was right back where she started, clinging to the people who had always cleaned up her messes. I wondered how long that would last. Not my concern anymore. Tessa was no longer the golden child. She was a scandal. A cautionary tale. And while she tried to shield herself in the arms of our parents, I had built something new, a stillness, a strength, a clarity she would never understand. I didn't need to win. I just needed to be free. And I was. Freedom didn't come with fireworks or some grand celebration. It came quietly, like a deep breath I didn't know I'd been holding finally released. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't dance around the house or toast to my own survival. Instead, I sat in my living room, calm, alone, surrounded by the remnants of a life I had once built with trembling hands, and felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. It was strange at first. The quiet no longer pressed on me like it had in the beginning. It didn't smother me or feel like a punishment. It just existed, a gentle space around me where no one's voice tried to drown mine out. There were no demands. No forced smiles. No carefully crafted scripts I had to recite to keep the peace. I was just me. And for the first time, that was enough. I walked through my home. The home Caleb once occupied, with his socks on the floor and his cologne lingering in the hallway, and realized it had stopped feeling like ours long ago. Now it felt like mine again. I'd rearranged the living room furniture, donated the throw pillows he insisted on keeping, repainted the hallway Tessa had once mocked for being so beige it hurt her soul. I kept it beige anyway. Peaceful. Neutral. Mine. In the mirror, I looked older. Not in a sad way. Not worn down. Just more defined. Sharper in the places that had once been too soft. There was a light in my eyes again. A new one. Not born from hope, but from truth. I had spent my entire life trying to be chosen by people who were never capable of seeing me. Grant and Elaine raised 2 daughters, but only ever had eyes for one. They showered Tessa with attention, shielded her from consequences, made her the sun we all had to orbit around. And I played the part one was assigned. The quiet sister. The stable one. The helper. I gave more than I had. Smiled through the bruises no one saw. Waited my turn, thinking one day they would realize I had been worthy all along. But that day never came. Not when I got married. Not when I built a life for myself. Not when I was betrayed. They didn't see me then either. They only saw the disruption I caused by speaking the truth. I think the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the affair or the lies. It was realizing I had spent years asking for scraps from people who never brought me to the table. That I had lowered my voice, bit my tongue, bent myself into silence, hoping they would eventually look at me and say, "We see you. We're proud of you." They never did. And now it no longer mattered. Tessa lived back in that house now, the same one I had grown up in, the same place that never quite felt like home. She was raising her son in the guest room, from what I'd heard, and clinging to our parents with the same spoiled entitlement she always had. Jared was gone. Dylan had vanished after filing for divorce. Caleb had disappeared into the background like a faded photograph. And I had walked away from the wreckage unburned. Freedom looked like Saturday mornings spent in silence with a book. It looked like laughing at my own jokes without waiting for anyone to laugh back. It looked like no longer needing to prove myself to people who had already decided I was less. It looked like knowing I had nothing left to explain. One afternoon, I stood at the edge of a small park not far from my home. Children laughed nearby, leaves rustled above me, and the sun warmed my shoulders. I watched families walk by, some laughing, some bickering, some silent, but none of them felt like mine. And yet, I didn't feel empty. I felt whole. Separate, but complete. Elaine had tried to call once since Tessa moved back in. Just once. I let it go to voicemail. I never listened to it. Whatever she had to say wasn't for me. It was for the version of me that still longed to be accepted. That Mira was gone. Sometimes people think healing means things go back to how they were. But that's not healing. That's pretending. True healing means letting go of the fantasy. Accepting that some people will never apologize. That justice doesn't always come wrapped in a bow. That the only closure you might ever get is the peace you carve out for yourself. So I did. I started volunteering at a local shelter once a week. Not to fill a void, but to give from a place of strength. I planted herbs in my backyard, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the time or energy for. I joined a book club where no one knew my last name, where no one asked about my family, and where my voice carried just as far as anyone else's. I didn't speak of Caleb, or Tessa, or Grant and Elaine. Not unless I had to. Not unless it served me. They weren't the center of my story anymore. One day, maybe I'll love again. Maybe I won't. Maybe my life will be filled with travel and new friendships and dinners I cook just for myself. Maybe I'll adopt a dog. Or start painting. Or write a book. Or do nothing at all. But whatever I do, I will do it on my own terms. Because I am no longer the overlooked one. I am no longer the woman begging to be chosen. I am the one who walked away. Not in rage. Not in revenge. But in clarity. And that, more than anything, is my freedom.